If you are the exact same as you were 8 months before, 100% something is wrong. And it doesn't matter that you're making revenue. It doesn't matter that it's going well.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. If you're doing the exact same thing you were 8 months prior and no one's thought about shifting something, well, it might be going good now, but I give you another 6 months and you're gonna get a shock.
Yeah.
And then that shock, and then you got to take another 4 months. So now you're already almost in another year trying to recover from it just because you had a good run. So, a good run is a good time to start to look at reorg. I always feel like when things are going really well,
Yeah.
like, all right, let's look at what we need to
Let's
change
disrupt everything.
mess it up right now, right?
Yeah. Welcome to Small Business Pivots. I'm your host, Michael Morrison, a small business coach and founder of Boss. Boss helps business owners create a business that can run without them. Go to businessownershipsimplified.com to learn more. If you want to stay up to date with our podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button now. Also, make sure to hang around to the end of this episode for my recap and coach's corner, where I share applicable action steps that every small business owner can do to move the needle in their business. Our guest today is William Gilchrist. William's diverse career spans Shanghai's media, Chicago's education sector, and pivotal roles in tech giants like Google. However, his most impactful venture emerged with Konsyg, the sales as a service mercenary he founded and now leads as CEO. Konsyg's global presence across 14 offices serves enterprises and SMEs, carving a niche as an end-to-end sales solution across continents. Today, William is going to share his vast knowledge of sales, which are the lifeblood of every business. Let's get to our guest now. Welcome to another Small Business Pivots podcast. Today, we have another special guest from around the world. Where are you coming to us from today?
Singapore. So, normally they'll say Chicago, Illinois, USA, which is where I'm born, but I'm in Singapore. So it'll be Singapore.
So our world history lesson, if someone were to visit there, what is one thing you recommend them seeing or doing?
Oh man. So the country is about 80 kilometers in general. I guess in American terms, that would be about 50 or so miles. Guys, don't beat me up on the conversion. I'm still very American about but about 50 or so miles around. And there are so many things to see in that small piece. But of course, if anybody's seen Crazy Rich Asians, you want to go to Marina Bay Sands and the amazing restaurants. I mean, there's so many things to see, but the big one is Marina Bay Sands. It's that big building with the three buildings.
Yeah.
The boat. That's something that people automatically want to go to, and of course the Merlion. And there are so many places, but after 14 years in the country, I know where all the bathrooms are. So that's something.
That's awesome. Kind of like the bean in Chicago. It's like you always hear about the bean. So,
Well, real Chicagoans, because I'm born and raised in Chicago, we didn't have the bean growing up, right?
oh,
So when they
really?
kind of,
Okay.
yeah, so when they kind of put it there, we're like, okay, I mean, this is a good gimmick, Like, all right, I guess people want to come see it, but it's not really super Chicago-y.
Yeah. Yeah. We have one of those in Oklahoma too. They put a big feather down in our big park and people take pictures from out of state. But here it's kind of like, yeah, it's just a
Like,
feather. It's a piece of art.
well, I had this idea of having, because of the bean, I had this idea one day of in some random remote country that needs the, economy boost, a gigantic metal teddy bear, huge though, really big. And I think it would be such a big thing that people will come for tourism. And I had this idea 20 years ago. So that's something that I'm hoping that I could probably do for a country at some point.
So the purpose of our podcast is to help small business owners, and you own a business around the world. It's a world business. And I know for a lot of business owners, we get stuck from a trial or tribulation growing up. Were there anything like that to get started with in our podcast here? Because I know a lot of business owners have a fixed mindset or something that's keeping them from being successful, anything like that. And then how did you overcome that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, well, for one, every single day is a challenge in itself. You're overcoming something and learning something every day. And that's not a cliche statement. It's real. Like every single day, I am learning something that I never learned the day before. But getting started in particular, I mean, one was an internal mental struggle, right? I actually knew that I wanted to start this thing, but I actually did not have the courage or any confidence in actually being able to do it. And it was an interesting set of experiences because frankly, and this is a bit of a humorous way of kind of bringing this out, but effectively starting a business is stupid. Why? There's no mathematical reason why it's going to work. All the statistics are actually against you.
Yeah.
If you really go down to every piece of why would you start a business? If you start a coffee shop that is called Starbucks, that wasn't the first coffee shop that ever existed. That's a stupid idea,
Right.
right? If you're doing something where you're going to be getting in other people's vehicles and literally ride sharing with random people with all the crime in the world right now, you're really going to get in a car, you're going to call it what, Uber? That's a
Yeah.
stupid idea. That
And
doesn't make
even
any.
Mark Cuban shot that down. I do believe on Shark Tank. Somebody did, I recall.
It's a silly idea. Why create? I mean, man, you're going to create a search engine when there's Yahoo out there? It's a stupid idea,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So all these things kind of bring a reality, I think, to starting a business, right? And I had to kind of go through that kind of mantra with myself to be able to get the courage to actually start.
Hmm.
I was kind of back into a corner because I was working for a company that pretty much showed me that you don't really need to be that bright
Hmm.
to start a business. That was a bit of a push, which was nice. After I left big corporate, I went into a startup with some really smart people. Then I went to another company right before I started this business. And I kind of realized, okay, well, this is just kind of regular. It's not like everybody's an absolute genius and you're not trying to pretend to be a genius to start a business. It's just regular people, and some people go kind of down that corporate route, which is awesome, and other people go into having the courage, the wherewithal, and just really honestly the, for lack of a better word, stupidity to go down
Yeah.
the route of really exploring the idea and seeing what happens to it.
I'm curious. So you've worked for big corporate and then startup. I'm curious. So you own a very successful business today. What is a takeaway that you learned from corporate, and what is a takeaway that you learned from kind of a startup? Those are two different cultures, dynamics, strategies. How did that help you today?
Oh, wow. Well, being in sales in particular, so I've only worked in sales capacity in either of those worlds. One thing that I've noticed is that corporate has the same exact people that are in startups, except more money and more security,
Hmm.
right? Just because you have company that has funding or it's a huge organization, that actually is an illusion that you're secure. And just because you are, your own business owner, that gives you the illusion of power. Both are illusion. More often than not, what you find in the corporate world are individuals that are focused on their individual role, right? It doesn't really matter what happens to the broader company or the bigger picture. It's mainly about their department, their role, and their specific tasks. So you are kind of laser focused to believe that your department is effectively the company.
Hmm.
And then that ties into the broader company, which in some ways is the case, but the mentality is like that. So when you're working with individuals, they're only thinking about their department. When you're in a startup or even an SME to some extent, you are kind of required to think about the bigger picture. There is no way to hide, right? You have to exist in, well, how is the revenue really going? A
Yeah.
revenue conversation in a startup is different than the revenue conversation that you have in your weekly meetings in a large corporate, right? Because you could almost tune that out because it doesn't really matter. It takes 9 months to get fired anyway, right?
Yeah.
So Where a startup, it's like, no, it's not firing. We might not be here if we don't figure out this revenue thing. So those are some of the key differences. I think that the intensities are different, but it's the same people in both organizations. It's just they're required to focus in different areas.
That's interesting. So you, the company that you have today is sales, correct?
Yep.
And one of the things that we talked about was that you are an introvert. And as a small business owner, it's critical that they are the face of the business and that they are the salesperson. Like if they don't know how to sell their own product or service, you don't really have your own business. And so, what were some things that you overcame to be able to get into sales as an introvert that could maybe help some small business owners get over that fear?
Absolutely. I mean, one thing I didn't run from myself being an introvert. That was the first thing. I am who I am, right? And what I found was that there's a superpower in all elements, right? Being an introvert is not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, it was the reason why I was able to do a lot more in sales because I listened.
Mm.
Introverts are a little bit more, are a little bit better at solution selling because they listen and they're able to take in the points and then say, okay, look, I'll get back to you and let me connect what you told me with our value proposition. That's a real sell versus the steamroller, right? The super
Yeah.
extrovert that's whining and dining you and the power tie and talking so fast that, you don't even know what was going on. You're kind of saying yes, but really at the end of the day, you're probably going to cancel the contract before it even starts because
Yeah.
you didn't really know what you bought. So more often than not, what I needed to do with being such an introvert is understand the advantages of it versus trying to like flip it,
Mm.
right? I know that, okay, there's some things I cannot be necessarily shy. I can be an introvert, but I cannot be shy and be a salesperson. That doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
So I had to work on from being shy to a little bit more communicative. I also had to look into more mastering the craft of the sell, the craft of the pitch, the craft of body language, voice inflection, all of that, just so that I didn't have to necessarily be somebody who I wasn't. It was more like, okay, what is my voice? How am I going to communicate this to the world or to people who meet me? And, not worry so much about not really wanting to interact socially about it. Those are some of the things that I started with. And then it kind of just grew from there to a natural reality to where, I absolutely love selling. I love interacting with people. I love pitching. Yet I'm the same person that absolutely hates crowded restaurants.
Hmm.
And I'm the one to go to the grocery store right before it closes or right when it opens, or a cafe that's very desolate in the middle
Hmm.
of nowhere purpose because I'm not really too into that. Like I
Yeah.
don't get my party, I don't party, things like that.
Yeah.
But I'm in sales, which effectively when people see me at work, they're like, there's no way you're introverted.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, what led you into the entrepreneurial world?
Well, I had the idea for a while. What actually led me to start the business was actually seeing the gaps, whether that be in large corporate, down to startups, down to companies that I was interacting with, down to friends who were working in corporates. There's a huge gap in the sales world. There still is. It's fully not figured out, where most sales organizations are designed and built on an archaic 1970s and 1980s structure,
Mm.
system, and outlook, right? The expectations of salespeople are so archaic because the market is so different than what it was in the 80s, for instance, right?
Yeah.
So you have the AOL CD structure of selling in a modern era where we have ChatGPT
Yeah.
that doesn't quite match up because I kept seeing those gaps across just it didn't matter if it was a big company or a small company and companies that I would just interact with. There's really a need for this. There's really a need to have that team that's not only going to sell on your behalf, but also at the same time kind of teach and showcase and consult as to this is what's happening. First off, your product doesn't sell itself. Period. It doesn't. And just because you did an amazing ad campaign and you got a few deals, that's not your sales pipeline. Those are just individuals who are interested at the time and then when they've engaged. But it's when you do a absolute cold outreach, sell, value prop, pitch, close, and then contract signature with money that has come in. Now we've done a sell. Now let's try to repeat that a million times. And if we
Mm.
can do that, now you know what the sell is for your business. It's been clouded with everything else that I mentioned before that.
Interesting that you mentioned that because I would just call it a framework of sale, like a sales system. And the other day I said something and somebody said, "Oh, did you take such and such course?" And
Yep.
it just kind of reminded me exactly what you're talking about. It's like there are certain things that we've been taught in the past to say or do or react to, and people can associate those with a particular course. And then the reason he mentioned that, because we were just having a casual conversation, he said, the only reason I mention that is because when I hear that, now I know I'm being sold to because you're using curriculum from a sales course. And there's so many
Right.
courses out there, like you're talking about from the 80s and the 90s and et cetera, versus today, it's more about the conversation, the relationship, and the how you outreach. And so I want to let you kind of share what your business is real quick because that it's amazing. So tell us what your business does so that people can relate to the information that you're sharing.
So we are a full outsourced sales organization. In fact, people call it sales as a service. Now, I can confidently say that we are the only actual sales as a service company in the world at the moment.
Hmm.
Now, that's a very strong statement because you see the term sales as a
So,
service all the time,
yeah.
right? But when you dig in a little bit deeper, no one's doing the end-to-end sell. They're doing components of sales, or they might do activities that might result in a sell, but no one is doing a full concierge service that is taking everything from no one knowing who you were all the way through the sales process up until a contract signature into money in your bank. So pre-sales to pitching to presentation to follow-up to demos to no, I don't really want to pay it, but then maybe we do it all, right?
Mm.
No one's doing that. And this is something that for us is actually a challenge because we get associated with, let's say, the BPOs of the world or the companies that are, let's say, able to understand us might not necessarily be the companies that need us at that particular time because they kind of understand what is needed in terms of sales. But the companies that probably would need us are thinking that we're just like a call center, but we're not.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a call center, but that's a very different service than what we are. So, in short, we are a sales mercenary group. That's the probably the most direct way that we say it, where we take contracts from governments, large enterprises, all the way down to the startups. I mean, we're behind 7 different exits of startup companies we've worked with. We've gotten them exited with revenue that we've generated for them. We've helped companies go from C to Series A, all the way up to B even. We've had 400 plus clients over the last 7 years. So our work is to drive revenue for people so that they're able to have better conversations either with their investors or to be able to scale to where they don't need us anymore.
Hmm.
And that's the main business model.
And so your business model, you mentioned that you're worldwide or global. Is that correct?
We're worldwide, except for a few countries like Japan.
I think you told me that the benefit of using a company like yours is also helping people recognize that you can sell around the world versus some business owners have a one-track mind of they can only serve within their region because they don't have a growth mindset. Is that kind of what you were mentioning in our past conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I noticed, especially being an American, and this is mainly aimed at American businesses, right? Being an American overseas for as long as I have, for almost 19 years now, I noticed that when it comes to companies that are coming to Asia early, like even startup level or, just out of startup level. They're usually from Europe coming into Asia. And there are a lot of Asian companies at startup level that were going into the US.
Hmm.
But there were never really that many American companies, which there are far more startups, particularly in like tech, for instance, that wouldn't even conceive of the idea of starting from day one, selling in their hometown and also selling in Singapore when the probably the requirements to do so would be the exact same. Like it wouldn't change anything. Like
Yeah.
you actually would just have a bigger market. You could sell in APAC. So that frustration really also led me to start this business, is to start to have that conversation. That conversation is to say, hey, look, guys, like you do realize as you're trying to expand throughout the Midwest, you do realize we could be expanding you across Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, New Zealand at the same exact time, which has a very, large population. And also automatically you're able to have that global stamp or a multi-regional stamp. We're also in Asia. So that's been something that I've really been trying to get across to business owners, particularly from the States.
Hmm.
Do get some Canadians who do it, but the American business owners oftentimes are not comfortable with the idea of those markets yet because maybe they haven't been there or whatever. So that's been a mantra of ours for a while.
That's really interesting because that is important and relevant for the listeners because so many of us do have a fixed mindset and we can't even fathom going outside of our market, our comfort zone, if you will. So appreciate you sharing that. What led you to where you live now in Singapore?
Interesting. I was 13. I was a student ambassador, and I was sent to China, and then I was never the same again. I came back and I said, okay, there's a world out there that is totally different than ours. And then ended up going to high school in Chicago, went to Bowdoin College in Maine, majored in international relations, and I minored in Asian studies.
Hmm.
And as soon as I graduated with my degree, I moved to teach public school in China, in Shanghai. And then I ended up realizing that, okay, well, I want to get a more corporate job. So I ended up going into corporate Shanghai and realized that I couldn't speak Chinese. So I ended up going to grad school in Beijing University. And then I had my whole plan set up. I was ready to go, graduated from Beijing University. And then it was 2008. The Olympics was coming and the economy was tanking. So it was time
Wow.
for me to get out of China because they're like, here's your degree and there's nothing for you here.
Wow.
So from there, I got a tip from an alumni, who was my mentor and also an advisor on Konsyg, my company now. He said, hey, look, you could be my intern down in Singapore. And I said, internship, I'm kind of old, but okay. I mean, I guess I'll do it. And I went down there and I started getting into the world of sales, the world of tech sales. And then that's what led me later on to go into Google and all that stuff, and then leaving Google and starting this business. So that's how I ended up in Singapore.
Wow. That's an amazing story.
You're listening to Small Business Pivots, a podcast created for small business owners. Small Business Pivots is supported by Boss. Boss helps business owners create a business that runs without them through business coaching, lending, courses, events, additional resources, and much, much more. Go to businessownershipsimplified.com to learn more. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to stay up to date with all our latest episodes, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you're loving what you hear, show us some love by giving us a thumbs up or leaving a positive review. Your support means the world to us and it helps others discover the show too. Thanks for tuning in and don't forget to subscribe and like. Now let's get back to our guest.
You started your business. So let's jump back to that first day that you don't have a job and you start a business. Let's talk about some of the pivots that you made and then maybe I would think that you probably learned some sales tips along the way that were beneficial, not for your customers, but more so for you. What were some of those early learning things that a small business owner could take away?
Well, I think one thing in particular with my background, it was that I've been doing sales for so long. So when it came to what I wanted to achieve and the value proposition, I was very clear on that.
Hmm.
But the difference was I didn't have a big flashy logo behind me at that time because I'm ex Google. So, that usually gets you a call back,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
In my particular case, I have this pink logo with a K on it. And I'm telling people that I'll be able to help them with their sales pipeline. And oh, by the way, we just got started.
Yeah.
Not the best situation. I think that the key learnings were more along the lines of realizing that I am a salesperson by trade. That's just what I am. I am what I am. However, I had to learn to be a business owner. I had to learn to think like a business owner. I never thought, I didn't realize that you had to think like an employer. I didn't
Yeah.
know what that was. I've been thinking like an employee or a student or a child, right? My whole
Yeah.
life. You go from child to student to employee 99% of the time. And there's no real playbook on how to be an employer or how to think like a business owner and see yourself at the same level as other individuals who might either generate more revenue than you or been in the game longer than you. So that was a process psychologically to be able to come to grips with this business. I knew I was good at what I did, and I was going to hire people who were good at what they do. But getting that mindset in terms of, no, this is us. Like, this is us. This is what we do. And this is how we're going to take on the market. That was a process for me
Mm.
completely. Once I was able to come to grips with that, it became much easier to sell the business because it was coming from a very genuine place of content confidence. It was, we are comfortable with the space that we're in at this particular moment. So yes, we are new. Yes, we do have a pink logo. There's a little K on it. Our mascot is a unicorn. And yes, this seems very weird because our color palette does not match what a tech sales company should look like on purpose.
Yeah.
And what we did was we just did everything that you wouldn't expect a company like ours to do. And we ended up presenting ourselves in manners. I wore a suit every day for 3 years, right? Every single day I was fully suited. It was fortunate being able to, have a team in Thailand as well, because I was going to the tailor all the time.
Mm.
So I was always dressed to impress and made sure to get the narrative of the business very genuinely into the ears of people and just being comfortable with where the wave took me, and enjoying the ride was the big thing, because it's not going to work out right away. Your dreams in terms of, we're going to make millions of revenue in the first year,
Yeah.
maybe, and that might be the worst thing ever for you, is that if you actually do make that $10 million your first year, that might be the curse. You kind of want to struggle a bit. You kind of want to sweat out and just see where it takes you.
You mentioned Google, and I don't want to get off on your past career path, but you didn't mention what you did there. So I'm sure a listener is probably wondering. You can just share in a few words.
Yeah, I was on a sales floor, and then I was a knowledge manager as well,
Okay.
where I was out building up sales teams. But I was on the sales floor for about 4 years.
So your past career helped lead you into what you're doing now as well, is what you're kind of referring to that as.
Actually, it's kind of funny. I didn't really learn much sales at all from Google. In fact, I learned all my sales prior to Google, which was under Kyle Haggerty, who was the person who brought me to Singapore. And I was working under him at TSL Marketing. And we were doing 150 cold calls a day.
Wow.
And it was real. And he put me through, Sandler sales training and things like that. I had some really good people kind of around me. So by the time I got into Google, I was kind of like this hungry dog, and then realizing like, it's not really about sales, really. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So, it's about, I don't need to learn sales. I just need to learn Google. Okay.
I was going to say, learn their system, probably.
Yeah, learn there. Well, it was just Google. Like, you just got to understand how the company works, and it's not really sales in a raw sense. Like, you're not
Yeah.
able to, you can, but it's the way it's set up. It's not what you would think in terms of what I came from. So it was a bit of a cultural shift. But I would say that prior to Google prepped me more for this. Google allowed me to dream, because you're in a spaceship. Everything's there. So then you're able to think bigger. You say, wow, I can go to space and come back down to Earth. I didn't know I could do that. Okay. Well, it's possible.
Do you think that's kind of what
pushed you to be this global company?
I definitely say that. I
Okay.
definitely attribute my Google experience to that. Being able to see things a lot bigger and not try to keep things kind of here. You're able to, with a laptop and internet connection, you can do as much damage as you want.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
your own mind that's holding you back.
And that's applicable for contractors. That's applicable for people that mow yards. I mean, the world is your oyster, as you're kind of saying. It's like, well, you don't have to go actually mow every lawn, but maybe you create franchises and then you call somebody like you and say, hey, can you help me sell franchise? In fact, I want to get real quick on what size of companies do you sell for? Like, who would this be beneficial for?
I would say, well, look, we've dealt with companies that were literally two people,
Hmm.
and we have companies that are 10,000 plus. Now, the companies that were 10,000 plus, of course, when we started 7 years ago, we weren't getting those contracts. So we got really good at 2 to 50. That's our bread and butter. We're really good at 2 to 50. However, as we progressed over the years and started getting reputation and started selling more into markets, of course, we got the larger contracts as well, which we've been able to navigate. We're very strong with 2 to 50, even under 200 companies and all that. But, our book of business is very diverse.
So the biggest takeaway is no business owner should not think big. I mean, the world is your oyster, as you're saying.
The sun's not going away just because it's set while you were sleeping, you know,
Yes, it's daytime for somebody else. Like it.
somewhere,
Yeah.
like what language do they speak, and get somebody to speak that language and talk about your value proposition there. And yeah, that's more of an opportunity for you to be able to make it.
Well, and I want to thank you for taking this time because we have a 12-hour difference, I believe, in our time. So it's the middle of the night where you're at, and I'm just here at midday. So I appreciate you being up to share your knowledge with everybody. So back to your business. So you started a business. What was kind of like that first pivot? Because I know I guess what I'm referring to is most business owners, they're on this honeymoon ride. Their
Mhm.
sales they increase, and then they plateau. And
Yep.
most of the time it's because they become the bottleneck. So did you experience that? And how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think I might always be the bottleneck. Because you have a vision and then you have to pivot, and then that pivoting doesn't feel the same way as the first one, but it needs time to warm up. So then you're always like, no, let's go back to this. So
Yeah.
it definitely happens with all businesses. And I would say that more often than not, one of the big pivots was in terms of our general structure. Like, we've had to reorg quite a bit over the years.
Hmm.
And that's usually where I feel like a lot of companies tend to forget. You're going to need to reorg, and reorging doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong. Reorging means you're adapting. Just like inflation, you have to,
Yeah.
adapt to the prices. You have to reorg for what's going on in the world right now, or where the hotspots are, or where the new areas of focus are, or how sales is done and what platform sales are done. I mean, if I still use the same tools that I was using 7 years ago, even though they still exist, no way we'd be able to do the things that we're continuously able to do year on year. And that's a hard process.
That's very hard. And I appreciate you saying that instead of me, because I share that with business owners all the time. I'm like, okay, I call them guiding principles, kind of like your vision statement, your mission. I'm like, okay, once you're done with this, you're not checking a box. And that's the way it's always going to, like, these are living, breathing documents that as you evolve, they have to evolve with you, or else there's no direction. And that's kind of, I think, what you're leading to, isn't it?
If you are the exact same as you were 8 months before, 100% something's wrong. And it doesn't matter that you're making revenue. Doesn't matter that it's going well.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. If you're doing the exact same thing you were 8 months prior and no one's thought about shifting something, well, it might be going good now, but I give you another 6 months and you're gonna get a shock. And
Yeah.
then that shock, and then you got to take another 4 months. So now you're already almost in another year trying to recover from it just because you had a good run. So, a good run is a good time to start to look at reorging. I always feel like when things are going really well, it's
Yeah.
like, all right, let's look at what we need to
Let's
change around,
disrupt everything.
mess it up right now,
Yeah.
right? It's always then. I think, rigidness is better when it's kind of like because you're able to kind of control the fall. But when you're up, time to spin the wheel because you never know, it goes even further up.
Yeah, I say so. Basically, discomfort means we're growing.
Absolutely. The word comfortable needs to be put in a box and thrown to the farthest island in the world if you're going to get into being a business owner. There's just no such thing. There's no
Yeah,
comfort. I steal sleep. I don't go to sleep. I steal sleep. I say, okay, it's time for me I'm gonna take some hours and I'm gonna do my 8 hours of sleep every night. I'm guilty every time.
yeah. What would you say? So now you have this successful business. A big question that most business owners ask me is, I'm always wondering if I'm working on the right thing. So I'm curious, kind of what you work on as the leader, the CEO of your organization.
I spent a lot of time in developing the people, particularly the leadership, and really trying to work within their strengths and to encourage them to do the same for their subordinates. That's probably 40 to 50% of my time, right? The other thing is also planning out where it's not really goal setting, right? It's more of a scenario of where are we in reference to our own abilities to deliver? More often than not, a lot of people will put goals, and those goals are based on a podcast they listen to, or the goals are based on a blog they read, which that's not your reality. And that wouldn't be, you don't know this person might have rich family that's actually secretly funding them. And then they write a blog and say my struggle. And you're like, why aren't I having that same success? Because you don't know their reality. So your reality is your reality. So when I dream and kind of set these benchmarks, I set it off of based on the circumstances that we're under or have been under, and based on the resources that we have and the knowledge that we attain, are we, based on my assessment, in a realistic trajectory that is positive?
Hmm.
Doesn't have to be great, but is it positive? And if it's positive, well, then that's way better than when I started writing it out on a cocktail napkin 7 years ago.
Yeah.
That's where I started, right? And I always make this joke and said, how can we lose when we came here with nothing? Winning every day. Now that you've already won, where do you want to go? And I
Yeah.
think that's where it gets entertaining. That's where it gets fun. That's where you get energized because now you're saying, I've already won. So where do I go?
Are there any tips, sales tips that you could give our listeners? Because most of them are small business owners and probably aren't quite ready to go global yet. They're just trying to get a handle on what they have. Any tips you could give them on how to clean up or shore up their sales process or system that might benefit them?
Absolutely. Well, first, come up with a methodology. And I don't mean a sales methodology that you can pick up a book and you read the book and suddenly that's your sales methodology. No, you have to come up with your own methodology and system that's based on exactly presenting your value proposition and what it does. That's one thing and why people would care. The next is look in the mirror, and forgive me, I'm a salesperson, so I'm very direct. Look in the mirror and tell yourself, nobody cares about my product. So have your methodology, look in the mirror and say, nobody cares about my product. No one's just going to buy it because it's cool. No one's just going to buy it because I'm speaking about it. And then go back to your methodology after you've said that to yourself and then review it again and make the
Interesting.
edits. Because once you do that, and this is a real process, it sounds
Yeah.
crazy, but it's a real process because once you do that, you go back to your methodology, you'll realize more often than not, the things that you've put in your methodology are things that you're assuming someone would care about.
Yeah.
You're making assumptions on it. So you're projecting what you care about on your methodology, and then you're frustrated that no one is behaving like you. That's why revenue doesn't happen, and that's where the bottleneck is. More
Yeah.
often than not, it's from projection. You're thinking the market's going to behave like you behave, and it's not the case. So have your methodology, come to reality with that mirror conversation, and then from there, A/B test different components of how you present your business, and also think very big and broad. Do not just hone in on one. We're going to start small, one particular market. I know this is the most common thing I hear. I know we'll be able to sell in this particular sector. because you know what? We've sold 3 deals in the last 3 weeks right here. This is it. We're gonna just drill in here. Big mistake. Because if that
Interesting.
doesn't happen, then you're going to be questioning your product or the salespeople or yourself, and then you're going to double down on it. So keep yourself very broad as well when you're doing your different tests in terms of how you're going to be positioning your methodology that you put together. So methodology, come back to earth and dream.
I,
That would be the best advice I can give.
I love that because I think most, I always say most, but I don't mean most. I just mean a lot of small business owners, when they leave the workforce, start their own business,
Yep.
they have this dream or this idea that all my friends and family are going to buy from me. And I'm
Right.
here to tell them that they're the last to buy from you most of
Yeah.
the time.
Still waiting on that phone call. Guys, you
Yeah.
watch
Yeah.
where
I thought my
instead
friends were going to help sell for me. And it's like, no, they know
yeah.
you as Michael or William or whoever it is. They don't, they're not there to promote you.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back with like when you mentioned when you sell those first 3 deals in this particular area, if you stay there, you're basically kind of committing suicide for your business. You're not expanding. You got to keep thinking bigger. And I love that. I love that. What's the name of your company?
Konsyg, Konsyg.
Is that
And we're
the domain too?
that's the domain, consig.com. You can definitely see everything. We have too much information on the website. So definitely check us out, konsyg.com.
Excellent. How could someone get a hold of you if they want to follow you? Do you have any channels out there?
Well, William Gilchrist on LinkedIn. That is the best way to find me. I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm always posting and doing amazing interviews with great content providers and always talking the conversation of sales. Really, I mean, everything on my LinkedIn is about these type of conversations. Funny outreach messages that I get, I'll screenshot it and remove the names and then start critiquing. Hey, look, it would have been better if it was this way or that way. We have some ebooks out as well. So konswg.com or add me, William Gilchrist, on LinkedIn.
So I highly encourage everybody to go follow William. He's got a lot of good stuff out there to get you to that level to where someday you will need his services so you can go global in your business. Is there any last words of wisdom that you're like, the one thing I learned in business, or the one thing I would suggest, or maybe a book or a mentor or something that you would suggest that could really help our listeners?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the biggest thing to kind of take away here, it really, and if anything could resonate, it would be to look in the mirror and come back to earth sometimes.
Hmm.
I think that is, I have to repeat it because based on my experience in big corporate startups and running my own and also dealing with 400 plus clients over the last 7 years. So I probably worked lifetimes of sales roles and
Yeah.
corporate roles just by clients alone, right? And the one common thread that I'm seeing is that we all need to look in the mirror and realize that there's not a magical pill. There's simply work ethic, skills, and leveling up and coming to reality and being more genuine. AI is not going to save you guys. And
Yes.
email wouldn't save. People thought like all the new technology is going to suddenly cut a corner to be able to solve business or business interactions or human interactions and revenue. It won't. So the best thing to do is to learn your way and have faith in it and adapt and adjust. And everybody's capable. Everyone is.
Yeah.
That would be the best thing I could say.
That's brilliant because I see so many business owners get stuck. They read a book and they keep reading it and they go chapter by chapter by chapter and they never pick up anything else. And it's, you said it beautifully. And I don't know that anyone's ever said that on our podcast. Like you can't rely on just one source. Like you always have to be learning and incorporating and pulling this and using that and getting rid of this and that. And because not every business is the same.
My entire business strategy for years has not been reliant on any kind of sales material. It's been on studying leaders and emperors of the past, actually. The Mali Empire of Mansa Musa, Napoleon, Caesar. I read those type of things, be like, okay, no matter how stressed out I am in a Q4, it can't possibly be as stressful as Napoleon was in the Alps.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I was compare who's more stressed out, but
Yeah.
like, understanding tactics and concepts and structures, and I actually read more historical books to understand how business have been done and how interactions have been done. That for me allows me to be able to hone my own empire. We all have empires,
Hmm.
right? And that in itself for me has worked. Where if I were to read the challenger theory, it says you should wake up and have 5 coffees in the morning before you work out because that will help your sales process. That's extremely toxic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just leads you down a path that's not genuinely you
Yeah.
versus hearing stories and being inspired by other people's challenges that should be able to bring you into a place of your own.
I'm going to enhance what you said because we had another podcast guest that said the exact same thing. He does not read, when I asked him what's a good business book, he said, I don't read business books, I read historical books. He listed
Wow.
off like the Shoe Dog, Hangry, people that have gotten their business to another level, and he doesn't follow any one methodology. He like, well, they did this, so maybe I can try a version of that or something like that. And that seems to work better for a lot of people. So that is awesome advice right there. Well, you have been a joy, a pleasure, full of information. I appreciate you. I'm sure you're about ready for bed. Again, it's the middle of the night where you're at. So I appreciate you and we'll stay in contact. And I encourage everybody to go follow William. You will learn a lot in the future. So thanks again.
Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
Welcome to the Recap and Coach's Corner, your go-to spot for practical coaching tips to transform your business into one that runs seamlessly even without you. In today's recap, we honed in on a vital essential that every business needs to be successful: the power of sales and the art of crafting a system that works. In this episode, we uncovered the crucial role sales play in the success of any business and delved into the keys to creating a systematic approach. Let's step into the Coach's Corner, where I'll share one actionable item to help you build a solid methodology for your sales process. Here's your actionable nugget. Map out your customer's journey. Start by understanding every step a customer takes from discovering your product or service to make a purchase. Identify touch points, concerns, and opportunities at each stage. This mapping exercise will not only streamline your sales process, but also enhance the overall customer experience. As you gear up to boost your business, remember this key step in creating a methodology for your sales. It's all about guiding your customers seamlessly from interest to purchase. It's about the relationship. Thank you for listening to Small Business Pivots. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast. If you need help growing your business, go to businessownershipsimplified.com and schedule a free conversation by clicking the orange button in the top right corner. If you have a guest or topic suggestion for our podcast, or just want to talk anything small business related, email me at michael@michaeldmorrison.com. We'll see you next time on Small Business Pivots.